What's up, guys? So this time, as requested, we're going to be talking about the numbers on a wheel and what you need to know when going and looking for bigger or different wheels. So when you're out shopping for new wheels and you're trying to change sizes and you look at potential wheels to buy online or whatever, you're going to find that there's several different numbers that you need to pay attention to. So today I'm going to talk about some of those, let you know what they mean. Some of this you may already know, and we'll just see what we can dig up. First of all, weight. Weight is something that gets overlooked a lot on wheels, especially online, because a lot of online retailers don't even list the wheel weights. But keep in mind that unsprung weight, and by unsprung weight, that means basically any part of the car that is not being held up by the springs, such as the hubs, the wheels, the wheel bearing, that whole part of the car. Unsprung weight is very important. It does not shift around. It's not dynamic like sprung weight is. And because of that, any unsprung weight that you can drop off of a car will improve its performance fairly decently. But in the same way, adding a lot of unsprung weight will be detrimental to a car. So it is important to know when you're looking at wheels, especially when you're upsizing, are you accidentally adding a lot of weight? There are always going to be lighter weight and more heavy options in pretty much any wheel size, though most of the time the lighter weight options, since they have to be a more expensive alloy, are a pricier wheel. Just be sure that you know about that, and sometimes you may be better off to go with a smaller overall wheel that's lighter weight if you can't afford the wheel size you want without adding tons and tons of weight. You don't want 40-pound wheels all the way around. The next number is diameter. I think this is the one most people understand the most, and that's just the size of the wheel, how big around it is. The only real thing I'll say here is that the bigger the wheel, the smaller the tire, because you will eventually run out of space. Plus, if you don't want to throw your gearing off very much, you're going to need to calculate the tire size down to match the new wheels. And I talked about that a lot in my tire sizing tips video, which I will link right up here. You guys can check out if you haven't seen it already. The other thing to watch is make sure that they match. Don't buy a 16-inch tire for a 16.5-inch wheel. Don't buy a 16.5-inch wheel for a 16-inch tire. That's pretty common sense, but just in case you didn't know. The next one, wheel width. Width is another thing that some people overlook because they're only thinking about diameter. But when it comes to performance, width is more important, because you can run a small wheel that's very wide and get a lot of contact patch on the ground and see big improvements in grip, which is generally what you're looking for when you're going with larger wheels anyway. Now, it may run up the weight. It's possible that if you go too wide, you're going to be gaining a little more weight than you'd want to, but that's kind of unavoidable in that your objective there is to put more tire on the ground, and more tire equals more weight regardless. You will need to run wider tires if you go much wider. Don't get a 225-inch tire, but then put it on a 10-inch wide wheel. Stretching tires like that is not only really hard to do, because a lot of times they don't fit, and you will make the tire guy who's trying to mount your tires hate you. But even though there is like a whole subculture around that style, it's not performance-wise optimal. It is not as good. You're wasting wheel. You're not putting as much contact patch on the ground. You're putting the sidewalls at worse angles to where they're not going to perform as well as they're supposed to. So in general, you want to try to keep the width of the tire and the width of the wheel pretty close to the same, or to what it's supposed to be. Next is offset. Offset comes in three varieties: 0, positive, and negative. A 0 offset wheel is a wheel where the mounting surface, where it attaches to the car, is exactly centered inside the wheel in general. Now, the other options you have are positive and negative offset. With positive offset, the mounting surface is going to be closer to the front side of the wheel. You see this more often in front wheel drives, as front wheel drives a lot of times don't have a lot of room for a wheel to sit out, so they tend to sit in a lot further. The other option is negative offset, which is when the wheel contact patch is closer to the inside than the outside. That you see more often in older rear wheel drives and stuff like that, because a lot of times on those cars the fenders are way further out than the hub. A couple important things about offset. One, this is going to determine whether or not a wheel fits your car. So it's an important number to be aware of. Two, you can alter this number some with spacers, but be very careful with using spacers, because if they're not hub-centric spacers, you may wind up with wheels that you cannot balance at all. You may also wind up with an offset that's not very healthy for your wheel bearings. And on that note, the biggest thing to remember is you need to keep as much of the wheel as possible under the bearing, because as the wheel moves further away from the bearing, it's increasing the leverage it's applying to that wheel bearing. And if it gets too far that way, you're going to wind up wearing wheel bearings out really fast and increasing something called scrub radius, which is when the wheel has to actually scrub or slide to be able to turn, because it's not pivoting on the axis it's turning. It's actually way out here having to move all the way around that diameter. So that's actually going to hurt your performance. So the important thing is just try to keep as much wheel under the bearing as you can. Keep it as centered as you can to the wheel bearing, while still making as much rubber as you want on there fit the car. The next thing that you will hear kicked around is the term backspacing. Backspacing is really a similar term to offset, but the difference is how it's measured. Typically, backspacing is going to be a measurement of the wheel's mounting surface to the back of the wheel. Now that's an important number, and sometimes that's listed on sites when offset is not. Now you can figure up backspacing by looking at the width and the offset, and you can calculate it. But if they have an offset, or if they have a backspacing listed, then you can just look at it and see. If you have 4 or 5 inches or whatever it is, you can look on your car, look at your hub, and measure back to, say, the strut, and that'll tell you what backspacing will fit that car without the wheel contacting something on the inboard side. So that's also important. Now, there are plenty of tire and wheel comparators online that you can look up. So there are easy ways to figure out what will and will not fit. Once you know what these numbers mean, you can just plug them in there. And another thing is, if you're looking at wheels from a manufacturer that don't show all the numbers that you need, feel free to call them, because a lot of times they have these numbers. They just may not list them on the site because they don't necessarily know that people are looking for them. So, don't be afraid to ask some questions. But hopefully this has helped you guys a little bit, and you've learned a little bit about what wheel numbers means. It's not too complicated. It's pretty straightforward. But if this was helpful at all, make sure you drop me a like on this video, comment and let me know if I forgot anything, or if you have any other questions or suggestions for other things to talk about, etc. And make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you see the next video when it comes out, and I will see you in that video. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.